The news of the Almighty being nothing more than a disguise that Orgodemir put on spread like wildfire. This is the new hot topic that every NPC in the world now obsesses over. There's basically no reused dialogue in this section. The whole world changed with the revival of the Demon Lord, and since you were sealed away until now, you haven't had a chance to visit most of it yet. So at this point there are basically two ways of tackling the rest of the game. When Orgodemir was dragged out of his disguise, a new dungeon, the Cathedral of Blight, rose from below the Cathedral of Light, and you can immediately visit it now. You can end the game right now, but either way you have to decide who stays behind, since only 4 people fit on the Skystone. Apparently, you can't really leave Sir Mervyn behind. While he has something to do back in Pilchard Bay, writing his memoir, he also has the highest personal stakes in fighting Orgodemir. Aisha also has a drive to avenge the centuries her people wasted reviving Orgodemir. He deceived them, so the reasons to let Maribel or Ruff stay behind are about equal. I think Ruff is the most sensible choice, because the only reason he wants to go with you is because he's bored. But personally I left Maribel behind. So while you could end the game right now, I will start by covering a few of the changes throughout the world. The biggest one is that all the people from the Kingdom of Faraday and the nearby town are gone. They angered Orgodemir and he either took them away or outright killed them. You never see them again, since postgame in this game takes you back to before you fought Orgodemir. They're just gone, and the only thing that could possibly help them is to kill Orgodemir. But even in the ending, all you get is a single throwaway line that they've returned. The disappearance isn't a story in itself, there's no rhyme or reason to it. It was a vulgar display of power. Orgodemir thrives off of fear, and while he could kill or transport away more people, he would much rather only take out one island than let everyone else tremble and dread the day he comes for them. Which a lot of people do, but that's not all the NPCs talk about. There's a lot of NPCs that are completely broken, that don't see a point in anything, that have given up hope on ever surviving and thus sometimes even lost their fear. They are just waiting for the inevitable, fully drowning themselves in despair or in many cases alcohol. And they sometimes even say that it was wrong of the spirits to ever unveil Orgodemir. This argument that they should have lived with this lie, not cared at all about what's happening to the people of all the other islands that were sealed away, is of course something Dwayne 7 has rebuked a few times before. The very first thing you do is going against living with a lie. The one that Astad is the only island that exists, and throughout the game you encounter all these situations where the answer is never to take a compromise like that. In Notagen, after getting rid of the initial monsters, life gets worse, but only for so long before it gets better. Stealing the souls of your fellow humans isn't the answer in the old trades, Abby, and no, the people of El Círculo would not have been better off stuck in a time loop. And should you have never set out on this adventure? I don't think so. But there's also more reasonable NPCs that are still hopeful. Some capitalize on the suffering, for example the Yggdrasil Dew vendors. Some NPCs are still praying to the Almighty or any higher power. Others find it impossible though. How could you turn to the Almighty when he was basically proven to not exist, or at least not in the expected capacity? Who do you turn to when your faith has been betrayed? Simple, you turn to one another. Humans need to help other humans as a society. And thus we get to the most reasonable NPCs. The ones who put their trust into humanity. Some people are waiting for a hero to rise up to the occasion. Maybe they want to fight themselves. The people of La Bravoure specifically believe that Sir Lysalot is going to protect them. Some of these beliefs are more foolish than others. Sir Lysalot of course won't fend off a single monster. In a sense he gives people hope, similar to what Orgodemir did when he was pretending to be the Almighty. The difference of course is that Orgodemir took advantage of that trust and ended up harming his believers. It's false hope, but if it gets people to keep their wits, all power to him. Sir Lysalot is basically their Santa Claus. The NPCs who will at the end of the day be proven right though are the ones who put their trust in you specifically. You aren't magically chosen to fight Orgodemir, you're simply the most capable person around. You've been on the most adventures, seen the most of the world. You have the blessing of a spirit, but many people do. That's not why you are the one who has to fight him. It's simply that you're by far the strongest person around. Another person that can utilize the water spirit's power is King Scuba from back in the Buckingham event. His knowing creates whirlpools that you can use to travel down to his domain at the bottom of the sea. He's a force of nature. But this visit is entirely optional, and the only thing that happens down here is that you're reminded of Shark Eye's wife, who had been turned into a mermaid. She gets one day every year during which she lives as a human, and during the ending scene she will be reunited with her husband, even if only for so long. Another change is that the people of Volgograd are now extremely hostile towards outsiders. They cower in fear, hide in their homes, and all of that because of their false history. The distortion of history is something the game depicts as a grey issue. It's not inherently bad, but this is a case where it's become harmful. So now with all of that out of the way, we will get to what you knew needed to happen, even before hearing all the NPCs remind you. You go and finally confront Orgodemir. And to do so, you fly the Skystone up to the top of the Cathedral of Light, which stands on top of the Cathedral of Blight, and you traverse through the 2 dungeons downward. It starts off looking very normal. The only thing of note about this very familiar dungeon is that you find the Mirror of Ra. It's a pretty niche item, only useful against one type of enemy, but what I want to mention is that it reflects your true nature. Not only is this a nice detail that Orgodemir, scared that his secret might be revealed, took the mirror to his dungeon to prevent anyone from using it against him, but it also confirms that Ruff has truly transitioned to human by now, given how it's not a wolf smiling back at him from the mirror, but his own reflection. Once you get to the Cathedral of Blight section of the dungeon, not much changes. The colors are different and the decoration is slightly different, but you're not going to experience much whiplash. You're going from one building to a contrastingly colored one, but after reaching deep, getting beyond the exterior that's visible on the outside, at the bottom you will find the cathedral to be alive. It's seemingly just one organism, and even deeper it's filled with eggs. This is the nest of evil, the breeding ground for the Demon King's forces. But beyond that, there's a room that you can't get through. The game gives you a hint that you can call the spirits now, but there's only one path you can see, which is covered by water. So intuitively most players are going to call the water spirit. She is the most reliable one after all. There's also a fragment for postgame which can be found down there. But at this point you can technically call the other spirits as well, even if the paths they open up are much less intuitive and direct. On each path you find one of the pieces of equipment that were represented by the Saints' equipment you gathered at the very beginning of the game. You'd expect only the chosen hero to be able to wear that equipment, but as we know by now, you aren't all the chosen after all. There are 2 more people with divine powers in your party, Aisha, who is blessed by the Earth Spirit, and Sir Mervyn, who is blessed by the Almighty himself. And these 2 can use the equipment just as well as you, or at least certain parts of it. And at the end of whatever path you choose, there's one last teleportal which first restores you to full health and then sends you to the scene of the final showdown. Space, or another plane of existence, maybe the Dark World, it's not clear. Either way, Orgodemir sits in front of the backdrop of the world that you restored, which serves as a reminder of how much work you put into restoring it to its current state. You aren't going to let him revert it to the fragmented, sad state it used to be in. Before you fight, Orgodemir gives you a pretty basic speech, calling you servants of a broken god. But you don't serve the Almighty, you fight for humanity. So you once again fight Orgodemir, who, unlike in the last confrontation, doesn't start with the pretty exterior. That might have just been the guise of the Almighty this time. He instead starts in what used to be his final form and transitions back into what used to be his first form. Which of Orgodemir's forms is the real one is ambiguous. They seem to have different personalities as well. Only the humanoid one talks about being beautiful. Later on in the ending tour around the world, we learn that monsters hate everything beautiful. Well, arguably, if we take what an NPC says at face value. In a sense, Orgodemir is similar to the devil in The Exorcist, who pretends to be different people or devils just to mess with the exorcists. And Orgodemir has a habit of pretending to be things he hates. But as you fight, Orgodemir becomes progressively hideous. This guise as well drops. He starts melting away and eventually loses to you. But before he explodes, he asks how a mere puppet can defeat him. But you already know the answer. You're no puppets of the Almighty. So the ground under you starts crumbling away and you're covered in light that carries you away and to the divine shrine. It's unclear what exactly saved you there and it's never brought up. This was by no means a dangerous situation for the party. but it might have been the one and only case of direct divine intervention from the Almighty, but there's no way to tell for sure. And thus everyone acknowledges you as the human hero who saved the world. They emphasize that it wasn't the power of the Almighty, this lore character you never actually meet in the game. This is all on you, and even his believers acknowledge that you are as powerful, if not more so, than the Almighty himself. So Mervyn stays in the Divine Shrine, but the rest of you move on. It just wouldn't be the end of a Dragon Quest game without a victory tour around the world you not only uncovered but now delivered from evil entirely. Or did you? The very first location you visit after departing from the Divine Shrine is the Old Raids Abbey. And if you remember the bandit problem there, that still persists. The bandits are still going to be criminal. They were never affiliated with the Demon King. Though I have to admit that all things considered, the bandits might not be reasonable, but they are lovable. Then the only noteworthy thing in Aeolus Vale is that you find out that the people of Hereday returned. The specifics aren't elaborated upon. Then in La Bravure, Sir Lancelot is still spreading lies. Who would have guessed? Now about how he fought alongside you. He might be bragging, but it's not harming anyone, so you go along with it and just pretend. This is once again the start of the distortion of history, but whether his name is added to the stories or not is inconsequential, and thus not framed as a problem. Then in the Temple Palace near Albalad, you will find that the Hadid lookalike is finally fulfilling his wish by going off on his own adventure, leaving one of his incompetent and written to be as annoying as possible brothers to become the next village elder. In Emberdale, now on finally your last visit, the festival from your first time in town is revived. The motivation isn't to appease Agathe, however, it's just a nice celebration and fun for everyone. Do they still let their children carry fire on their heads? Yes, and that's absolutely terrible. The excuse used to be that the children were raised around fire and specifically this festival, so now in the present that the children don't have that experience, this is just silly and forgetting about the cautionary tale that is their past. Then Hubble is next, where for one, Crispin is now going to seriously expand his repertoire. The queen there, you know, the one who outlawed all art except music and dance in her kingdom, who finds executions enjoyable. Yeah, that one. She fell in love with the protagonist and there's this implied romance there. But of course, given how you are a silent protagonist and how she's batshit crazy, it appears very one-sided. Buckingham I'll skip, but back to the Sea Dragon, Captain Sharkeye asks you whether or not you want to be a successor as captain of the ship. And that sure does sound prestigious, but you can't actually go through with it. The reason being that the protagonist already has something he wants to do, and thus you return to Astad in Pilchard Bay. There you can see how all the NPCs hold up. Pike now has a job. He's still an alcoholic and morally not grey but black, but at least he got a job. And at this point, before moving on to the rest of the victory tour, I want to finally get to the point I've been trying to make throughout all these visits. It never shows the world is perfect. There are still imperfections, but that's only human. The people you've seen, the bandits, the liars, the incompetent, the negligent parents, tyrants, the scum of the earth, they are all bad, but they're human. They're worth saving. And you as the hero can't beat the bad out of their hearts. You can only defeat monsters and outward threats. Whether they ever change their ways is only up to them. Everyone needs to work constantly, continue on with this Sisyphean task to make the world a better place. Yet the world will never be truly perfect. But that's an all-right state of being. You don't need to control everyone, that wouldn't make you much better than Orgodemir. And a perfect but inhumane world might theoretically be better, but it for sure wouldn't be as lovable. So back to the tour. The King of Astad reminds you of your humble beginnings. What started the whole adventure was the curiosity of you and your friend Kiefer, and this is where I see the core message of Dragon Quest VII. And Kiefer is its personification. Childlike curiosity can't be stopped, and it's the source of all innovation and improvements. It's something to be cherished and nourished if it's there, never something to be restricted. The entire game sees you traveling to all these locations. It has you as the player be curious and discover their ways of living, come to understand them. In these events, issues are often shown from two perspectives. For example, prayer is sometimes shown as good, sometimes shown as bad. It just depends on the context, and this makes you think for yourself. It makes you be curious throughout almost all of its runtime, and the story is often about finding out the truth. Is there really only one island? What is the Almighty speech going to be like? Is that really the Almighty? Even if the last one was also driven by necessity. And time again, it's proven to be rewarded. No, the people in Notagen or El Circolo would not have been better off being left to their own devices. And speaking of El Circolo and Notagen, the only sane NPCs in those regions were the genius from El Circolo, who was very open-minded, and Buddy in Notagen, who didn't have prejudice against monsters. And time again, the people who are shown to not be helping you but need your help are the ones like the people of Emberdale who are ignorant and can't have an open mind, like the people of Faraday who think every robot is bad, like the people of Aeolus Vale who solely rely on their wings and never learn to walk, like the people of Volvograd who try to burn the priest out of fear, and the list goes on. Even on the other end of the spectrum, the people of Gröndal who blindly let a stranger into their village and never for 1 second thought about what his intentions were. They were kind and they were welcoming, but they weren't open-minded. Let your curiosity guide you towards becoming a well-rounded person with an open mind and an open heart. Expand your horizon, come to understand other people and the world around you, and don't hinder anyone else in this. Don't shelter your kids from the world. It's an important message. But without lingering on that, a banquet is held in your name. You go to bed and the next day Mu was the very first that started off the game. Your father, who is back by the way, is about to sail out for another fishing trip. So you're given not one but this time 2 sandwiches. One to deliver to him and one for you. This time you're going to go with him. There was a moment after the Almighty's revival where you thought you were going to go with him, but that attempt started with you getting sent down to peel potatoes and never set off. Now you're a full-fledged part of the crew. And this time when you discover Maribel hiding in the same spot she hid in a year ago, your father says that it's fine for her to go with you, and thus you for the first time set sails together with your father and sail out for a peaceful fishing trip. And now I know what some of you might be thinking. How can this be the ultimate ending for these characters? Catching fish as part of a crew in some small village. And the reasoning is relatively simple. It's because this is what you want to do. Your father doesn't care whether you actually succeed him or not. It's not about pleasing him despite what the wiki claims to know. And even if the job was framed as being so prestigious at the beginning, you saved the world, there's no more prestige to be had. And if you think that the job is beneath someone who saved the world, Dragon Quest VII takes a clear stance on that. Nobody is above or beneath anyone, everyone has their role to fill. Remember the NPCs of the day from each region. In a lot of them, they were framed as the real heroes. Regular people ranging from a guy who just likes monsters to a small child who has his heart in the right place. You are only as much of a hero as the people around you allow you to be. Captain Sharker was a great hero, but self-admittedly, that was only because he had a great crew by his side. Molloy, from the very first event, the guy that the villagers who were supposed to fight alongside him left to die, is now only remembered as a tragic tale. You need these people and you're only a hero because of them. Putting yourself above everyday working people would be foolish. And if you're going to try and understand them, you should do so as an equal. Now you sail into the sunset and the game ends on a melancholy note. You find a tablet, not one for traveling to different places in the past, but one meant to bring a message to the future, from your best friend Kiefer. He basically dedicated his life to reviving the Demon King, something you've just undone. But I find it impossible to say that the life he lived wasn't his own.